Hi everyone! Today I am joined by Soph Nguyen. Soph is a product designer based in Los Angeles, California. They are currently the lead product designer for a startup called Passes. Passes provides various tools to content creators specifically around helping them monetize their brands. Soph has worked for a variety of other businesses and startups in the past. They also have a degree in cognitive science from the University of Southern California, along with a minor in user experience design. Today, they talk about various topics, including how they first got interested in product design, navigating burnout, and a new tool they're excited about. I hope you enjoy the show. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for joining me, Soph. To start out, I'd love to hear a little bit about what your experience was like growing up, where did you grow up, and yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so I grew up in like San Jose, California, and um was primarily like raised like speaking Vietnamese. And so I the whole world of like art and design was like still pretty unfamiliar to me. Like my mom was a like when she back in Vietnam, she was like a calendar maker, and she did like painting for calendars. And so like that was my intro to painting and like starting to be more like creative. But most of my like upbringing was like learning how to read and like learning English. And in back in San Jose, it was like mostly me, my mom, my dad was like working full time, and I was raised like pretty like first gen, low income, like didn't necessarily go to like the most well funded school, and so there wasn't a lot of programs to explore the like arts. However, one thing that I was like really like raised by was like public library programs. And so I learned about how to use a computer and like how to make like Pixar, like, I forgot what the program is called, but it's like like you can like do like splatter paint, and there's like I forgot what it's called, but it makes like very audible noises when you like click on it. But that was like my intro to like not even like I guess like my first intro to design. And my mom would take me to like the public libraries every single week, especially during summer. And that's where I actually learned how to read and like really fell in love with this world of like fantasy, as well as like understanding a little bit more about like my identity as a like Vietnamese first gen like student in America. And then slowly, when I went to middle school, I started to write more, and I was really fascinated with Vietnamese folklore. And so it was a lot of my mom growing up, my mom reading to me via like folklore stories, and then I would try to like paint them and like imagine what it looks like. And then in middle school started to write about what those kind of universes looked like. And I think that's where I really fell in love with this idea of storytelling and creating universes. And that was like primarily my main form of like creation, which was like it was like funny enough, like writing on Wattpad, and I was like, "There's no way." But then people started reading it, and I was like 12 years old. And it was so funny because like my first books were like I'm shocked that people read them, but I like made it viral sort of. So I viral for 2012. And so it was like I built an audience of like 200,000 readers. And here I was like really, I guess, like shocked by how people were also inspired by my writing. And I had like my first like fan mail ever by a girl who was like in Vietnam saying like my stories inspired her to write too. And I was like, I was so in awe of like how story could do so much and like kind of reach people. Um, and so going towards high school, it was a lot of, okay, I don't know what exactly I'm going to do with my life. And I was like pretty high achieving, but still more like I don't feel passionate about anything specifically beyond storytelling and creating. And also like volunteering and doing like nonprofit services. And I found out that like through designing, and this was like, okay, I'm like self teaching as I went. So as I'm making these stories, I'm like, well, I need covers for my like books. And so I taught myself like Photoshop. And like it was definitely a pirated version of Photoshop that like a 15-year-old can make. So I was like, oh, whoops. So I like had like different covers, and then other people were asking me to make covers for them too. I was like, I guess I'll do that too. So there was this like little like e-commerce world in this like Wattpad universe. And so I was making covers for people, learning design and like more like graphic design. Because I mean, like, which 15-year-old really knows what like UX design is at that point? But I was having a lot of fun. And so high school, I was like, let's see if I can apply these skills to do something that's like more impactful. So kind of started to, I was like doing a lot in terms of like volunteering. I think I felt like I kind of fell in love with creating communities where people wanted to help and make an impact in like what I was more like passionate about was like helping like women and like single mothers and like shelters. So I created this like program where high school students could volunteer to like hand out things essentially, and like those things were I would contact like companies with a lot of tech wear. So like like think like Bay Area, Silicon Valley merch that like employees didn't want to wear anymore. And they had a lot of access of that. And I was like, well, don't throw it away. So it turns out that people have a lot of like Adobe merch or like SAP. And then I would take all of that tech kind of merch, put it in packages, and then like help find different like homeless shelters, and then have like a group of high schoolers across like counties like helping pack them, send them out. And through doing that, I was like doing a lot of design, but also like systems thinking of like how to run this. Albeit I was like 16. So I was like, I don't think I was the best at it, but I felt like I was able to apply what I learned craftily and it worked. And then I think how I really got, I guess, to where I am now in terms of like finding what is the right path was like then moving to LA and then going to college and specifically studying cognitive science and design, where it kind of taught me like, okay, like I really care about building these universes. I care about the systems to make those universes possible. And how do I want to apply it? And I think studying human behavior was like the most helpful thing to me, because now I'm not only just like hypothesizing, but I understand more of why do people rely on specific technology to do a specific thing, and then how can I use that knowledge to build a little mini universe that helps people do other things. And so slowly the curriculum kind of led me to doing specifically product design. However, I feel like a lot of growing up is like design is design, and I'm doing a little bit of everything all at once.
I love to. Well, first of all, you mentioned the public library, and I also used to do like a lot of programs at the public library as a kid. And I remember doing like they'd have lots of like kind of creative stuff, or like I remember at one point like they had like a program where you could use like their 3D printer to like print things
Yes.
out and stuff like that. And it's like they've got so many like resources, and they're like it's like a great community I think to tap into, because there's like it's often like free, and it's like just a way of like coming together, like having someone be like teaching you to these things and like exposing you to them.
No, I mean I'm glad that you relate and feel that, because like I think I'm back back in the day, like no, but like in 2008 and 2005, it was like even having an access to a computer was like incredible. But not only that, like there were like programs and software, and then like we had at least like my library had like summer programs where they kind of taught you a little bit of how to use like it was like PixArt or something, but not exactly PixArt. It was specifically like this like painting tool. And I think fast forward to today, I'm like quite like not like what's the word? Like happy, proud, like excited to see how those programs have expanded, especially in Los Angeles. Like they're like 3D printers and they will have like literal product design courses. I remember in like Burbank's Public Library, they do like how to use Photoshop and there's like instructors coming in and I feel like that's like a hugely untalked not talked about but like deserves so much more hype and like oh my gosh like it's crazy how much kids are able to learn and I think especially with younger generations having access to um like these like not just like design software but just any type of creation is so important um given like how I know, like the world is quite fast paced and sometimes brutal. And like at an early age, you should learn to create, not just for the sake of creating. So you're creating like output or content for people to consume, but it's more like you're just creating because you love it. And it's like unbridled joy. And so with these like public libraries and like more free services, I'm like, yay, like more kids get to be kids. But like as you create, you learn what you really love. And like I feel like people innately love making. Like there's a joy in play that's like often lost. Like kind of like as you grow up and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to start thinking about how to like I like hate it, but like monetize or like if it's like you're making art but you need it to be sustaining your lifestyle. And when you're like younger, ideally you don't have to think about it and it's a privilege not to have to think about it. But like a lot of these programs are I think what makes or helps kids learn to create joyfully. Um, yeah.
That's really cool. So you mentioned that your mom was a calendar maker.
Mm-hmm.
So was that like making like wall calendars or
She made wall calendars, also like book calendars. So like in Vietnam, like like I guess a lot of Vietnamese households, you'll have like these huge like it looks like a big like poster and then inside there's like a bunch of squares and you like kind of rip them as each day goes and so she would be responsible for creating the art on the paper and then on the outside itself and most of her like painting was like flowers and a lot of like flowers, plants, trees, animals, like a lot of painting nature. And she loves, like to this day, she is like one of the like best artists in my mind. And so I honestly think like that's most likely where I got the interest in like design art in the first place.
you've talked about how Vietnamese was your first language and you learned English when you went to school. Can you talk a little bit about like what that was like and how that affected your experiences?
Yeah, so definitely in elementary school, like it was hard. And I think it's because like at that point, say English second language programs were, I would say, pretty rudimentary. Like um it I think taught me like this is how you say I want to do something. But it wouldn't like translate directly to like this is how you make friends. And so like making friends is really awkward for me because yeah, you know, like kids will talk and they'll be like, I want this, let's play. And I would just be so grammatically correct and then I'd have to think and like I would think in Vietnamese and then speak in English. So like my sentences be like pretty not even fragmented, but very like, oh, right, we can do this. And it didn't flow. And I was really awkward because I was like, maybe like five, like throughout the ages like 5, 6, and 7 was like really trying to nail like grammar and understanding what nouns and verbs were. But then also learning it in Vietnamese and then learning it in English, and then learning the actual like grammatical principles. Um, and I think like in that like intermediary phase, it was really hard to make friends, and I think that's why I leaned so much towards like reading books, and that was mainly how I got better at like learning English, but also like better at understanding how to make friends, because I guess as I was like reading these interactions between like characters, and I think like a fun um author or like book series is like Percy Jackson. And like I remember reading Percy Jackson. It was so cool because I was reading these interactions with like Percy and Annabeth, like the main characters, and I remember like laughing for the first time because like I usually read books and I'm reading it to learn, but it was like the first time I read and I was like, oh my gosh, I kind of love these characters and I relate to them and they feel like real people and real friends, and like how they were talking to each other. That was kind of like how I learned to interact. And I remember then like recycling jokes from the books, and then people laughed out loud and I was like, oh my gosh, Percy taught me that. But that was like, I think that was like the very like magical moment where I was like, oh, like writing and storytelling like are quite life changing, world changing like aspects, because beyond just like communicating, I'm also learning so much about, I guess, like other worlds, other perspectives. And it was like the first time where a protagonist, like, I think that was when I learned about what ADHD was. And I was like 8 years old. And I remember asking my teacher, like, what is ADHD? And learning about like what neurodivergence was. But then my first instance of learning about it was through a character that I deeply admired, that like I think Rick Riordan had a great way of kind of talking about different like neurodivergence and what it looks like without it being stigmatized. And I like grew up learning about what that meant, and like I then was diagnosed with ADHD, but I wasn't like, oh, like I'm different or anything. I was actually pretty excited about it because I was like, my favorite characters have ADHD. Like it's something that's good. And so I think that is so like magical in itself, because it's kind of like the reversal, I would say, like in terms of I was really proud of it, and people were like, "Why would you be proud of it?" I'm like, "My favorite characters. They are so talented because they are the way they are, and that's why I am the way that I am." Um, so yeah, I would say that's kind of my like upbringing. Eventually, I got better at making friends and like learned how to socialize with other people, but I definitely like a huge attribution to like Percy Jackson and like reading books about like characters that looked like me and like interacted with the world. Like that taught me so much more about, I guess, like school and writing than like actual classes.
That's really cool. Yeah, I can imagine that, like, kind of the power of it being a story and kind of seeing the, especially when it's like a really well written book, when the characters like come to life and you can see kind of their differences, but how they're like interacting, it can really kind of like show you. I can see how it would kind of show like a more, yeah, just kind of like showing that like human side of it.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. And it sounds like it kind of like gave you a connection to storytelling in a way. So you've mentioned a little bit about how you studied cognitive science, and you now work in UX design. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what user experience design is and kind of how, yeah, how you like got started on that path.
So I initially I studied at USC, and I was first a business major, and I took a psychology course and really fell in love with it. Um, and it's like so cliche to say, but it just like I was like, whoa, because there's so much about human behavior and thinking that is like biological, and all of these things that I never kind of really understood. Like, okay, like why are people addicted to their phones? But like not knowing why that is was like always like confusing to me, or like I'm I'm very like, I want to know why things are, and then like, what about it, how does that lead you to do something, and how does that impact a person to I don't know, like change the way that they think. And so in intro to psychology, one of my like favorite aspects was like developmental psychology, where the professor was talking about how like little kids will like learn the idea of self, and like at what stage does the baby learn that? By like having like a red dot or like marker on your forehead, and then they'll look at a mirror and like not be able to like recognize that that is them because there's a red dot there. And eventually the point where they are able to look at that and perceive that that is themselves. I think that is like quite like, I mean, I was like fascinated after learning about that topic, and I wanted to like learn more and more. And then there was this one like lab. So like I was like, okay, business is fun, but I think I was like so much more curious about this world of like specifically cognitive science, because the curriculum allowed me to take like behavior impacted through technology, and then take classes on like um UX design as well. And so the breadth was just so much more expansive. So I switched majors, and that like officially after taking a few psychology courses. And then I took one course where it basically, like if you're a cog sci major, you would have to like work in a lab. Like you had a choice to like have a senior thesis, and um or like not a senior thesis, just like a thesis. And so I took that class, and then I got to work at like Professor Wendy Wood's habit lab. And the whole point of that lab, or like the specific study that I was like researching for, was testing how people's behaviors kind of changed with like app usage. And that was really how I got into like UX design, because it was looking like monitoring like how often do people like reach for a specific app, and how long are they there for, and what is the tendency for them to like reach for that throughout like a certain time frame, and then reflecting like what was their mood afterwards. And so really getting to see like how people like rated their emotions after going on Instagram for like an hour. And most people like rated on average their moods were worse. And so I'm like, it's funny because like you would think that like at least there's like some joy, but people were like, okay, now I just feel a little bit more tired than I was. And there was like, of course, like more detailed questions that measured it. And of course, like correlation isn't causation, but there's definitely a pattern of like they would look at like their bank app and mood low. Like, and I was like, that makes sense. When I go into my bank account, I am a sad person. And so after like kind of looking at this study, looking at like how do people like feel after going on TikTok, yet they like go on it so often. And then after we study that, we would study like, okay, well, like how inclined are you to go back on that app though? And like the time frame that it takes for them to start craving that kind of like interaction. It was like, I don't feel good about being on this app, and I feel a little bit more tired. And then the next thing would be like after like one day they would rate like right after I went on the app again after the call ended. So it was like, but why would you do that if you know like you're telling me that you don't enjoy being on that platform, yet you are still on it, and you're like admitting to me that like you go onto the app knowing that you're not going to feel super fulfilled. And so I then was like, okay, there has to be a science to it. And so that thus it was like, okay, well, there's this world of product design where it's specifically supposed to make you feel a specific way. Like it's supposed to raise your adrenaline, and that's why you want to keep scrolling, because there's so much of a like I think most people talk about like this dopamine rush when you go through content that is very stimulating. And even through TikTok, they'll show you something that is like, this is really gonna, like, if it's like your first time, they'll be like, boom, like this one has like a pretty high rate of making people like entertained or stay here longer. And then they'll show you stuff that's like, but you're like interested. And then it'll hit you with a, oh, this one, like, we know that this is gonna like make you chuckle or something. And so I think like after kind of studying that, in addition to like doing like my thesis, I was like, oh, like this isn't like coincidence that like there are entire teams kind of building that experience, knowing the science behind why you keep scrolling. And I think, I guess my like hope immediately after like kind of learning that is like, is it possible to design an experience that isn't like predatory or like full of consuming? I think because like in UX, like I think one main thing is they call it like dark UX, which is specifically designing, knowing people's patterns and using their data to kind of like, or like data based on like interaction patterns, to kind of force you to buy more or consume more or like give a lot of yourself to the product. And so I think that kind of challenged me to think like, okay, I want to learn product design and UX design because I want to create user experiences that really honor a user's agency. Like even the term like user is like really weird because even UX designers and like the origins of the word user is like, it doesn't deem the person you're designing for as human. It deems them as like a data and a statistic. And so I think that's why the language shifted to like product design, but it's like still kind of the same thing. People just, it's just like inherently the experience is made to commercialize. So I think as I was like kind of learning, and I was also taking a lot of courses that were like gender studies, and I like basically have like a minor in like gender studies, and I think in those classes I learned a lot more about how to create freedom inside structures and what that looked like, and I wanted to kind of bring that towards design where um, I wanted to kind of challenge like how people created these apps without like, I guess, a like objectifying the user, but also creating an experience that could fully be and feel like, um I guess not like parasitic almost. It's like treating everyone with agency and having it be a genuinely fun experience. And yeah, I think that's kind of like how I got started.
That's really cool that you kind of had that like interest in like the psychology behind it and then kind of got like exposed to it. It sounds like you kind of got exposed to the like tech aspect and like software aspect kind of through that and like maybe with social media like Instagram, how people are maybe like designing it specifically to be addicting or to tap into those like habits of people being like, well, I feel tired when I use it, but as soon as this is over, I'm gonna like go back on it. It's just like, could this be better? And that's actually like one of the things I like want to explore like through this like podcast and like through the interviews I'm doing is kind of how we can have like a better relationship to technology. Because I feel like all these things like cell phones, social media are all still so new, and I think they do have like a lot of power to connect people like in different places in the world, and for you to kind of get like to be able to like share ideas and connect with other people who kind of have similar ideas and stuff like that. But I think that we could be like interacting with this technology in a way that would be like more beneficial for our lives. And I think we could be like thinking about it in a way that's like almost like limiting how much power it has over us and like kind of being more intentional. So that's really cool.
I just wanted to bring up like it is super cool that you did talk about like technology, and I'm glad that's something you're exploring in this podcast, especially because like I think one thing that I wanted to bring up, like in addition, I guess, to that is like, despite like how much I hate how addictive it is, like my parents they like immigrated here in like during the height of the Vietnam War, and like my mom never got to see some of her best friends, and like the first time she was able to ever see them was through like Facebook Messenger, and it was like 30 years of not seeing her high school best friend and seeing them, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like as much as I hate this idea that it is like kind of taking over our lives in a sense, for the first time I kind of also saw how much agency it was able to give, at least like for folks who are like low income, or for folks who are like first gen or immigrants like my parents, like they never had such technology to ever connect them with their like loved ones from afar. Like it used to be like not even a cell phone, like a, a landline phone call from my dad to talk to his best friend, not even in Vietnam, like his best friend in San Jose, like 3 miles down, was like, that's $1 a call. And so phone calls were very different. Like my mom could, the only way she could even fathom going to or ever seeing her best friends or like my dad with the rest of his family, because he immigrated here with like four of his siblings, and his other six siblings still live in Vietnam today. And he was like, I don't know. Like he would have to like buy a card, and on that card it would be like, you have 120 minutes to call them, and it's like $30. And so he would have to like plan specifically when to talk to them, and the phone calls, like they were short because it was like, okay, like it would be him, he would have like my grandma would talk to all of the like my aunts and uncles. Again, 120 minutes on the clock here, they can't like they're it's like and it's on the phone, so they're not even seeing any of this. And it's just like even hearing their voices was like a magical, wonderful experience, because it was the only thing that had like connected them together. And it's crazy because my dad can just FaceTime them now. Like we don't have to go, he has to go to a store, basically drive all the way to like downtown San Jose, where there was this one shop that specifically sold these cards to call to Vietnam. And that, like the entire trip itself, it was like they had a call like maybe 3 times a year, because it was like hard to plan, it costed money, and it was like it wasn't like not accessible, because then like the folks in Vietnam would also have to like bike to where they needed to get the same card as well. And so it was like, yeah, this is like, that wasn't even like, it's crazy because it's like, that was like 20 years ago. And like, now they can just talk to each other whenever they want. And my dad can like spam call my aunts from Vietnam, and he can totally do that and send her memes. And like that level of connection, at least like for my parents, because they're older, they're not like addicted to it, or like they're like, we have so much other things we have to do. But it's the idea that they can just call me whenever they want. And like that is a whole new world to them, because like before it, you could only wish or dream of doing that. And so we grew up like being like, I guess like already seeing like what or how impactful technology is, and then like future generations who grew up with FaceTime already, and it's like it's so interconnected that you feel like your entire life is on there. But then I guess like zooming out and looking at like my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, they're like, this is a mystical, magical like object. Like my dad loves his like iPhone, and like in a healthy way, because like he doesn't look at it all the time, but he loves calling with it, because it's like he was like, isn't that the point? And I was like, oh yeah, like wasn't that the point of an iPhone? Not even an iPhone, like wasn't that the point of a phone? Like you just want to connect with the people that you love. And so I think it's like finding meaning in those things, and like they're, I guess like my principles in design really does come to like, does it serve the people you are creating this for? And so I always bring up the example with like my parents and technology, because I'm like, they learned how to use an iPhone simply, like not because it was like everyone has it, but they learned how to use it purely because they wanted to talk to their siblings. Like what a crazy world, and it feels so different.
Yeah, I love how you use the word like magical, because I feel like when we step away from technology, or like step away from like phones specifically, and just use it for the things that it's like best at, I feel like it almost does make it more like, oh my gosh, this is this like magical cool thing that kind of is like a good magic and not like a, oh my gosh, I'm, like waking up and immediately like addicted to it. Um,
Exactly.
so that's really cool. So I'd love to ask about one of the projects you've worked on to give listeners like a little bit more of an idea about like what you do as a UX designer. So could you talk a little bit about what you did for ABC News Games?
Yeah, absolutely. And I that was like one of my favorite projects ever. So at ABC News Games, it was entirely like basically they just had an idea. Like no wireframes. I came in and they were like, we need a game designer and we need someone to essentially like create functional prototypes to show to leadership and like the executives at Disney that like ABC News needs games. And like I think their first like premise, and it was from like the games team at Disney, was they were like, okay, like New York Times Games is great because everyone loves the like I think like during the pandemic especially, it was that game where you like connect the words. I'm forgetting, but it's like you I it has like a little B on it and then like oh my gosh, it's not Scrabble. It's okay, I'm forgetting the name, but essentially everyone was playing it and guessing letters and words and the like game team was like, can we do something for ABC News? And I was like, okay, let's look at our users and see what they're like most inclined to do. Let's understand a little bit more about like what our demographic is. And I think what's important is like understanding like their user behavior. If we're leading more towards like, are more Gen Zs reading ABC News, or is it more millennials, and like what is the likelihood of them wanting to play a game, and if it is a game, what kind of games. And so one of the like I guess like starting points of that project was I needed to understand like why, and like again it was like if I didn't fully believe in it I would say like oh like we're just that's like not gonna hit, or like people are not going to enjoy it, or it feels like grabtastic in a sense where it was like is the app doing too much. And so doing the user research was super super important. And so throughout the process it's doing like competitor research, doing workshops. And so I led like the first inter team like workshop where I had folks from ABC News. And those are folks working on like the elections, working on the like electoral map. And those were like some of their biggest features ever. So I think like upwards of 100 million users because people are watching the elections. But they, and I was also on that team working on like a gamification feature where like on the electoral map you can like guesstimate like which state was going to how each state was going to vote, but also use that as an educational opportunity. So as you like click on each state it also gives you opportunities to learn about the different policies each candidate might is rooting for. And the goal was to educate as much as possible but also create an experience that was rewarding. And so I had folks from those teams as well as pure games teams. So think like um, Disney Channel and their games team, folks from Marvel, and kind of had everyone together and brainstorm like how would like something like ABC News, like what are the most ideal features? What are your like what would you want to look for as people who like go through ABC News and you design this every day, but you're also playing like the games that you make or like the experiences. And so after doing this like kind of 1 week study with the internal teams, I then like tested with like real users. And so there is specific software that we use to find like specific demographics. So in this case it's like we could narrow down to just ABC News, or we could narrow down to like people who go on all kinds of news and they love reading the news throughout different sources. Um, and so was able to kind of like validate like hypotheses. And then that's like the initial phase of research. Then, and I had to kind of like outline what that study looked like, and then pitch it to like my lead saying like, is this like something we can invest like our resources into, and kind of like outlining the trajectory of that project, and then getting like sign off. And so sign off usually means good. We can have you work on that for like a couple of weeks. Then I was able to take a lot of those like studies and then apply it to like designs. And so one of my like favorite part of it, one of my favorite parts of it was thinking about like the ecosystem that it would exist in. And so like if ABC News were to have a like games app, where would it live? And like would you be prompted as you're like watching on the TV screen that you have like an app? Like I mean like you could have like the Disney app on your phone or like ABC News app on your phone. Like would you watch the news and play at the same time? Like how would you kind of interact with that? And then one of the main things that I learned from the studies is like people actually will turn on the news and leave it on the background, and actually want to seek more meaningful ways to engage with it. And so working with the like game teams, we were able to kind of conceptualize a few types of games people would be really interested in. And so I think you like saw my like projects, but I think one of it was like a type of like trivia. And people like love trivia, but if it's like specific to like headlines and articles, or if it's specific to specific franchises, or like there's like different, I guess, like genres and types of news. Like if you're looking more towards like entertainment, what would that look like? And so I was able to kind of like map these types of games, what it would look like visually, even the like artistic style that it would be in. I also worked on like the language we would use. And like and I think the most like I don't know, second most interesting part though is definitely thinking about like branding and visuals, because if you think of the news and ABC News, it's like what comes to mind? Like how do we make this exciting but also, give breadth and levity to the topics that they might be talking about? Just because if you have ever taken a New York Times like article quiz, sometimes the topics are going to be heavy or it's about policy making. And so while this is like a great opportunity to engage the like users, I'd say, like you also want them to learn. Like you want people to and it's kind of like you're motivating them to learn more, because like you'll finish playing the game and then you're like, wait, what policy was passed? And then like click on it. But on the like revenue side, it's like thinking like, okay, like the more clicks, the more engagement, we can think of where to put ads, and that's like one part of it. But the part that mattered most to me was like, okay, like will this help a Gen Zer who like maybe doesn't watch the news that often be able to say like, oh, okay, like I realize that this policy or this like politician is voting a specific way, or like these are some policies that matter a lot to me and I want to stay informed. And I think that is so important, because we did like research, and it was like most Gen Zers get their news on TikTok. Like actually, it's like actually like like the Democrat, like the I think it was like over 89% of Gen Zs in America you like get their news from social media, and it was TikTok and Instagram. And so I was like, okay, like and so that's why like these like net like news networks are really upping their like social media game, because they're like, okay, like we can't just pretend like they're like we can't pretend that like Gen Zers and Gen Alpha are going to like look up ABC News or like CNN or like NPR. Like they're not really going out of their way to do that. So like we have to use this algorithm. Like we have to work with the technology we have to like work around these like younger folks' like generation. And so in my hopes of creating this game, it's the goal is that like I'm designing for not just like our generation, but like Gen Alphas who are like primarily going on like Minecraft and like Roblox. Like that's actually how they're learning about this world. And so if we're thinking about the lens of gamification, like how can we make engaging ways for people to actually learn about what's going on in the world, and like design for it. And um it's interesting because like I before working at Disney, I was at Blizzard and it was like pure games like Overwatch, Diablo. And this was the first time I was able to kind of take games user experience and kind of have my own agency to create an entire like suite of games, but also think about users that aren't like they're not just people playing a game and turning it off. It's like this is like real people who listen to the news, or they don't listen to the news and they get the news on TikTok or Instagram, and they might not be super informed, or there's a lot of misinformation. Like, how can I get those folks to not like love listening to the news, but at least make it fun enough where it's bearable? And that's like so weird to say, but like people really don't love listening to the news. They love social media telling them about their perspective on the news. And so it was like that was like the most like hardest actually challenge, but like the most rewarding because finally when we were like able to test like does this work, like um I think we were able to kind of see that like younger folks actually did like engaging if they were able to like, oh, there's a dog barking, it's okay. But we were able to see like people like Gen Zers would play games during their lunch breaks, and like the main thing was like they used it as like a socialism, like not social, like a socializing method. And so they would like share their scores with their friends, and that was like that's how you get people to engage, which is like, oh hey, do you want to play this too, or like can you beat my score? And like if that's the way to get people to be engaged with the news, then so be it, but at least people are informed, and I think that's really important.
That's really cool. It seems like such a fun thing too. Just like, I mean, games are, it's also, it's easy for things to just get like so serious, but it's fun just to like, to have it be a game. And it seems like, then within that, it's like people might not realize how much goes in behind the scenes of like understanding kind of like the problem in the beginning, and then, understanding like how users of like different, or people of different ages, like kind of interact with things, and like going from there. And like yeah, I think people might not realize like everything that goes in kind of like understanding what's going on, and like understanding what might be like the best strategy, and then kind of figuring out a way to like blend like the fun of a game with like bringing up like policies that are getting passed, or like current events and stuff like that. So that's really cool. We've talked previously about burnout, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your experience with that has been, and like if it's affected you at any points in your journey.
So I think with burnout, as I was talking about like all of these like fun projects and like working on things that are really exciting, I think one aspect of work is that like it like there's this like myth that I think startups especially will try to go, and they'll say like, if you really love your job, then it shouldn't feel like work. And it's like, that is fake. That's propaganda. I think you could be passionate about something, but if there is an output that is being monetized and that you're not 100% owning it, then that is work. Like I'd say like it's completely different versus like if you have a project that you're super passionate about that's like purely for you, and as you're making it, that's not going to feel like work because you're like there's not an output that is being demanded of you for a certain time frame. Like that kind of ownership fully belongs to you. Versus like if you're working at like a startup or a like tech company, the realistic like way is like work shouldn't feel like work, except if you don't do good enough, like you're gonna get a bad performance review. I'm like, okay, then like then it feels like work because then you like you can have a pay cut, or like you can get fired. And it's like there's so many I'd say like, I guess, things to consider. And so as like a like professional who's worked across so many like big tech companies to like small, and I was like also like a head of design at like a game AI startup when I was like 19. And like that was like, I had so much fun working there, but there's no denying that I was like burnt out because I was balancing school, I was working full time, and I was also like managing two other design interns. Um, and like the reality was like there's only so much time in the day, no matter how much people say like, but maximize your schedule. It's like there's it's not even 24 hours. If you like, you have to sleep for 8 hours minimum. Like realistically, and then realistically you have like 4 hours in like school, and then the rest of the time you have to eat, and it's like you have to be real about it. And I think like 19-year-old me was like, those things don't define me. Like I don't need to work on a time frame like that because I am superhuman. And I think it's good to have like that like passion, but I don't think that it is worth the like toll that it takes on your body. And so like I was like sleeping for like 2 hours. I was literally always working, and immediately kind of felt that crash towards like the end of the semester because I had finals. I had like a big kind of like project deliverable because we were pitching to like a big like company. I think it was like we there was like a conversation about uh like combine like talking to like chain smokers or something like that. And I was like, oh my gosh. Because it was like an entirely like new feature. Like they wanted to like create just like a much bigger project than what realistically anyone was capable of within that time frame. And so the problem was like I didn't know how to say no. And I realized that like one of the biggest skills that I would recommend people really invest in was like learning how to say no strategically, and like people will respect you more for it if you're able to push back and like be more clear on what that deadline looks like, or being like one of the main things that a product designer does is like say no. I would say, or like say like, okay, like someone will come to you and they're like, oh, I want to create like a feature with like ABCD like requirements. And they actually might not fully know why. They just think it's cool. And like you as a designer, you're expected to push back and say, like, why do you want A, B, C, and D? And like, do you need all four within one day? Like realistically. And then you're able to kind of justify why you need to prioritize A over B, or like why you need to prioritize, say, like, um, instead of designing a feature, do you really need to redesign it one more time? Or do you mean like you want polish on specific buttons? Like, let's narrow down what is being asked of you. And not because like you're like, I can't do it, but it's more like, what is the maximum amount of impact you're able to have with the resources that is in your possession? And I think like younger folks like, or just like at least like when I say like younger folks, I mean like early career product designers will tend to do everything, or they're like, okay, like I need to follow this double diamond. Like in product design there's like the double diamond that is like explore, research, and then define, and then test your hypothesis. But in a like real work environment, like product design, like product might work with a product engineer or like a product manager, or sometimes there's no like product person, it's just you and the CEO, and they will not know what they want and they really expect you to define that for them. Or they'll like feel really strongly about something but not have the data to back it up. And so like why user research is so important is you can actually justify like maybe that hypothesis isn't necessarily correct, or like one aspect of that hypothesis is correct, but we can validate it and see like what has the most amount of impact is actually just fixing this like issue that is relatively low lift. And when I mean like low lift, it usually means like easier for the designer to design given what they have, and easier for the engineering teams to fully like flesh out that idea. Um, but burnout, I'd say like is most, I think, relevant when you are going through like a life circumstance. And I think companies, it really depends on the company, which is why I really urge like early career folks and folks who are getting their first like internships or job offers to really like, not just like when I say like look at company culture, I don't mean like do they have like fun perks. It's like really look like, do you have time off, or do you have unpaid time off, unlimited time off, and what does that actually mean? Because like in some places I've worked where the boss that I worked for would say, you know, you have unlimited time off, but you actually can't not work during that time. You're just like remote. And I was like, what? Like I was shocked because I didn't think they, I know. I was like, so I'm just working remotely. And they're like, no, we're not allowed to work remotely. This is paid time off. And I was like, but I'm not off. And they're like, yeah. And like, so I'm working. So it was like the first time I experienced that, I was like shocked because I was like, I already, when I was signing my agreement with them, I was like, I just want to let you know that I have a vacation planned. And at that point, I hadn't ever taken a vacation since graduating. And they were like, okay, that's okay. And then on that vacation, I worked 8 hours a day. Like I had to, I was like with my parents, and we were like, my parents were like swimming in like the beach. And I was like, why am I doing this? And it was because I didn't push back enough. And I think like that's like the kind of thing that like early professionals, like you really need to like prioritize your precious mind, body, and soul by like really asking, you know, the employer, like, can you like explain what, you know, your time off policy looks like? And like most places, like the like con is like you actually don't really want paid time off because it's so hard to measure. Like there were no sick days, but you also like I worked while I was sick, and I was like, I'm burning out because my boss expected me to work when I was sick. And so once I was like in the ER and I had to take a meeting, and that was like normal. And I was like, I don't think this is normal for this company. And like my boss was like, I like, my boss was like connected to an IV because she also like was it. I was like, no, like guys, like we're dying. Like this is like because everyone in the entire office had COVID. And so I was like, I'm in the ER. You are like literally chained to an IV. And like our other like designer at that time gone. Like actually like their voice was not working, and they tried. And I was like, this is not an okay like culture to have. But I think like it's romanticized because it's like, but like we're like life is about like working and like the grind, and like if you don't work in your 20s, then like your 30s are going to be it's like, no, that's like propaganda. I think genuinely it's like agency and ownership, and like your company is supposed to respect that, and not push this idea where it's like, if you this company isn't meant for you, if like it's like, no, like that's against the law. Like you actually need to give people time off. And I think that's like the main thing, which is um like and I will say like at Disney it was like very different because it wasn't unlimited paid time off. It was like Disney really cares about their like culture. And I'm not like, oh my gosh, pro any specific company, but I was pro their like specific like health leave policies and insurance, because it was very clear and direct. It was like, you have X amount of like off days, and if you don't use them for your vacation days, it translates into money, because it's like that's paid, like that's paid time off. And so it's like, for that day you're not working, you'll get that cash back. And like your vacation days can roll over. And then your sick days, those don't roll over. So if you're sick, take them. And I think having that clear cut, like you have it, like it's actually really good, because then you're not constantly doubting, like, oh my gosh, am I taking too many sick? It's like, well, we all got 25, so you should take it when you have COVID. Like it's so much different, because like multiple times I've gotten COVID, and like I feel like the best companies that care more about their employees will respect that. And those are the types of cultures where people should look for, only because, like, if not, they're going to take advantage of you. Like, no working from the ER. That's obscene. That is crazy. Yeah.
Well, I love what you said, like kind of close to the beginning about kind of being strategic with your time
Mhm.
and like knowing how to say no. Because I feel like that's something I've also kind of had to learn. And I feel like it's been empowering in a way because it's kind of been like, oh, this way, the things that I'm saying yes to, I can really show up and do my best
Yes,
at them.
exactly.
I loved how you talked about kind of how like the importance of doing like user research and having the data, and then that kind of like that information does allow you to like be more strategic. And I feel like that can be used in a lot of like different contexts of just kind of being like, okay, what is really going to be like the best use of my time? How can I like make sure that I'm, and it's also kind of like some of it is like you might be able to do a lot, but it can't all happen like this month.
Exactly. No, exactly. And I think like a lot of creatives, like not just like UX design, but like as a student and a human being with like an allocated 16 hours a day. Like, I'm not even going to say 24 hours, because it's like you need 8 hours of sleep. And like within like 16 hours, realistically, what are you able to do within this one day? And like, what does that look like in a week? And like really thinking about like, and like interestingly enough, like I'd say that's where your time should go, which is planning. And like I used to be like a full like type B person, and then had to be a type A, only because I realized that like if I'm just like going in blindly without any expectation of how, my work schedule is going to go, that I will end up overcommitting, and then that means working over weekends and like sacrificing my time. Like one of the things that I really regret was like I didn't take like I remember like going through a period of like grief where I like lost my grandparents, and the company that I was working for was like kind of weird about it. Like in short was like, okay, well you have your like 3 days time off, and then you should come back and you'll be just fine. And it's like, I don't think that's how like humans work. But
Yeah, not
the
at all.
no, like the expectation was that like you'll take your bereavement leave, and that's like 1 week, and like you come back just fine. Like that's the part that I think is like, that's so hard. But it's like you're still expected to have these outcomes, and they'll say to your face like, well, like, we understand the circumstances, and it's very, please take all the time you need. And then they'll go and say like, can you like revisit that deadline though? And it's like, I don't think that's all the time I need. Like, it's like, and so what I've learned though is that like, it's so important to, and I think it's like a privilege, of course, but like, if you have any company insurance or any kind of health insurance, to have a provider by your side, and someone that you like really can trust and rely on, only because they're the ones that have the power to say like, okay, like you need to take time off, and like I'm going to write you a literal note. And like the company cannot say no to that, because it's like that is for your health, and you need to prioritize that. And so I was really lucky that my doctor really saw the physical signs of me getting really burnt out. And it wasn't even just like appearance. It was like physical symptoms of me getting really like lethargic, being really tired, like not being able to sleep well at night. And like those became like long-term patterns of like insomnia. And it was important for me to have a provider that A is able to like back me so that I can have a doctor's note, but then also like request time off and be legally protected for it. I think most folks don't know that, or like I going in didn't realize that like you can do that, but it's like, yeah, you like once you like enter like a tech company and you're like a full timer, you will have to pay insurance so that if you do take like a disability leave, that you get paid to take a leave. And it's like people don't know that, but like you get paid like up to like 80 to 100% of your salary. And so like those leaves can go from like 1 month to 2 months to like a year. And people don't know that, so they'll like keep burning themselves out until it gets to a point where that's really dire, and they don't really know what state laws legally protect them in terms of like taking leave, or even just like different like disability requests. So like I am someone who like struggles from like intense anxiety, and it's diagnosed. Like I have like my service animals to like help me through it. But one of the main things was like my doctor was able to say for a period of time that like I need to work from home because I would get super like stressed, and it's like a hard period, and they're like the companies legally have to accommodate for you, or like if they can't, they have to show like legally that like they can't afford to. Like the reality is most companies can't afford to like like let you work from home, or like have kind of like different accommodations. But like it's so important that Gen Zs are aware of it, because I've had many friends of mine who fully burnt out, and like when I say like really had a really bad crash, it was like to the point where like they were really suffering and didn't know what to do, so they quit their jobs, and then they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do, I don't have any money, like I don't know how I'm going to pay the rent. And it's like, wait, like did you know that you could have taken leave, or like that's like the way that these systems are like meant to protect you. And not a lot of people know that, so like they're going to be in a predicament where they're like really like not only kind of struggling alone, but then the company is really relying on folks not knowing these protections. um because it's like if you work for a company for like more than a year, and you are like full time, and you like have insurance that like when you're on like medical leave, they're supposed to A, pay for everything, like your insurance is paid for, B, like you are not required or supposed to work at all, and they cannot fire you. Like it would be against the law if they even tried to, and people don't know that, and so they're like scared of even asking for it. But like it's so essential that like folks are aware, and that it should be destigmatized, because I think like again, like these companies rely on us not knowing how to speak up or how to talk about these things, um and by having the like information but the vernacular to explain like this is why I'm taking leave, this is what I need, and to know like your own limits is like really really important, instead of trying to like use your last bits of like energy to like push through a project. I think that's just like my main like tip on like managing burnout. And if you're like noticing that you're getting up to that point, then like it's important to be able to talk to your boss and say like I feel like I'm at capacity, but again strategically, because it's like it's crazy how much politics is involved. But you have to say kind of like, if you want me to put my A game in one project, then let's break down this second project, or see if we can move this timeline. Let's see realistically how much bandwidth I have, and like framing it as, if this company or whatever wants the best outcome, then they will have to understand why you are prioritizing your time with just this one project or like this one part of the project first. And then that kind of like having those conversations with your manager and setting those expectations then, because some managers will like not check in, and you might kind of be like, I don't know, like, am I like slowing this down, or like, am I taking too long? But it's important, like, flip the narrative. Be like to your manager, what is the longest that I can take? What is the fastest amount of time? Realistically, what can I do? And what do you like? It's like you can either you can like choose. I guess like this like one saying that I love is like you can choose three. It can be like pretty or nice, cheap, or ugly or something. It was like fast, pretty, and cheap. And it's like you can only have two. And I think like it's important to, if it's going to be fast, it's not going to be the best, but there's going to be something there. Or we're going to be slow about it and it'll be nice, but it'll take time. And having your boss be the one to like prioritize to you is like, that's the ideal, because you shouldn't be the one that's like guessing what the company wants. It's their responsibility to, also prioritize. But in doing that, you save yourself from burning out because you're not doing the guesswork, you're not overworking, like you're setting clear like measures. So, and you have to document everything, like every single meeting, have the notes so that like if you go back or 2 weeks pass and then your boss is like, actually, I wanted you to make the entire project, then you could say like, actually, like we had a meeting 2 weeks ago where you actually helped me define, but you say it in a politically agreeable way, so you're like, oh, I thought that we agreed on the limitations of the project, we outlined it here, and so my job, to my understanding, was prioritizing the metrics that you had set up. And then that way they can't say that like, they can't change the numbers on you. I think it's unfortunate that you have to like think about these things, because again, like in working in corporate America, I've learned that like not in a like a really sick sadistic like not everyone is looking out for you, but I think you really have to protect yourselves and protect your peace and your space.
Yeah, I really love that you talked about all of that because I think it's so important. What you talked about in terms of like knowing what you can do in terms of like working with your health insurance or with your doctor, like that is such great information for people to have. And I think it's so important because it's also like kind of what you talked about in terms of sometimes when you're dealing with burnout or needing to like communicate with people about how much realistically like can be on your plate. It's not like all or nothing. Like you
Yeah.
can find a way to either like take the time that you need now or like get
Mm-hmm.
things off your plate now without it needing to be like pushing yourself to the end of your abilities and then like fully burning out. And I think that's so important because it's also like a lot of this comes, or at least sometimes it can come from like really enjoying what you're doing or feeling excited
Exactly.
about it and like wanting to make progress, and kind of feeling like energized about it. So it's like I feel like knowing these different like strategies can help people realize that. I think it can help people like think about the long term and kind of realize that they can take steps now that are going to like be healthy for them, allow them to like feel good and feel happy and still work toward their goals. Like it's they can still be productive. It's just that having like a good and healthy amount of your time be spent toward like things that are going to be where your performance is being measured and where there is kind of like that pressure.
It is so important to me to share this only because the world is hard, and I think a lot of folks might not realize that like they're not alone in this, or it's like, trust me, you are not the only one feeling this way. It's just no one talks about it because that's the culture that's kind of ingrained in us. At least like older folks who are like millennials and part of like the boomer generations that I worked with, because I've worked with like a span of folks, and it's interesting because some folks will like be very, I'd say like not inclined to take time off, or they're like, but I worked the hard way, like I don't, I don't subject myself to having mental health challenges. And I'm like, you, okay, but you should still take time off. Like, and I've also had like coworkers who will like know the system through and through. And the ones that I think end up, in my experience, have had the most amount of promotions were people who are like, I'm not going to do that. But instead of saying that, they'll say something very strategic about their like balance and time. And because they're so good at like not just like creating their boundaries, but they're good at like structuring the conversation and managing expectations. So it's like at every single step of the way, they're getting promoted because they're meeting the goals that they set versus like people who say yes to everything. It's like, well, you're not achieving, because what does overachieving even look like? You're saying yes to everything and you're doing everything. And so it's like versus someone who, and I think one thing is like, don't overcommit. And it's so better, like so much better to even undercommit and lower people's expectations in a way, not like lower, like, but like say like my biggest tip is like, say you like finish a project earlier, do not time, like don't turn that project in. Like if you said that it was going to take you like 1 week and that was the expectation, you don't want to finish earlier and then they'll keep thinking like anytime that Soph says 1 week, they actually mean 3 days. So let's start giving them more work. It's like instead you say like you're so passionate that like you couldn't help yourself and you like stayed up because you like designed one of your favorite features. And it's like, okay, well, it's done. But you did say in your planning meeting that it's going to take you 2 weeks. And instead it took you like a week and a half. Like slow those 3 days, that extra 3 days, like albeit work on something random, or like you're allowed to do that. Just because you like beat your own expectations doesn't mean that you have to raise the bar on yourself so that people force their expectations on you. And like that's like honestly like life-changing advice, because I wish I did that. Like my first internship, I like overcommitted and my manager told me that I did the work 3 times faster than other people. So they gave me 3 times the work. Like they gave me more projects. I finished my first project and they were like, do you want to do one more? And I was like, sure. And then I was like, why am I doing it? Because then I asked other people and they were like, no, you're only supposed to have one project. And I was like, oh, like I'm literally doing extra work. But then I finished that one too. So they gave me more and I was like, yay, and then I thought about it and it's like, but I'm getting paid the same as everyone else. I'm also an intern. And like suddenly my workload went from like 8 hours a day to like 12 hours. And like, not like I did it to myself, but I was like, I wish someone told me that I could just do my one project and people will equally be as impressed as they were the other way around. Because like the reality is like as much as people are impressed by you, it's more about the metrics and the documentation and the data that is going to get you that promotion. Like you saying like this design was able to have this impact on this many users and this drove our revenue up by this amount, that's going to get you a promotion. Not like, oh, I stayed up and I worked 15 hours a day and I did all of this, because like the manager can always turn the tables on you and be like, well then you should learn how to manage your workload. And it's like all that kind of like the double expectation. So rather than burning out, it's so much better to prioritize, focus, and then be clear about boundaries. And then when you do exceed that expectation, so you like finish early and you like had extra time, so you started on another project, but you don't need to tell them that you started another project. And then by the time that you're supposed to start on that new project, you're already done and you've already set yourself up for consistent success without needing to burn out. um and yeah, that is the tip.
Yeah, I really love that because like it kind of sounds like a big thing is like knowing how to advocate for yourself. And I feel like that's like it's not even necessarily that um that other people are like out to get you or something. It's just that like you're the
Mm-hmm.
one who knows like what's going on for you, what your limits
Exactly.
are, what's on your plate the best. And you're the one who's um kind of like responsible in a way for like knowing how to be like, okay, this is what I know like works for me and how I'm going to be able to like show up and how I'm going to be able to like undercommit and then be able to like meet the things that I've said versus like promising so many things and not being able to keep up with it. So yeah, that's all really good. So one final question. We talked a little bit earlier about like kind of the power of like technology. So I wanted to ask um, if there is a software program that is like your favorite to use or that the has like a beneficial impact on your job that does something that like or helps you do something that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
I I have to say like Figma only because like it is like, the software standard for product designers, but they came out with features that I think leaned more towards like joyful. So there's this like it's called Figma Draw, and I am like a doodler by nature. So one thing that I like love about Figma Draw is like you're able to like be more creative, and like it kind of breaks the bounds of like boring, clean, sleek, design. And, when we think about like product design, it's very, at least, the wave that it's been riding is like minimalistic, flat icons. And now we're actually going back because Apple released their like glass, water icons, and they look like it's not necessarily skeuomorphic. It's not like frosted glass. It literally looks like liquid glass, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, like, but it's like we're finally going back to a point where design has the level of joy that it deserves, or like feeling and emotion, and it interacts. And so with Figma Draw, I think that the barrier of entry is like really low. That like my baby cousins have learned how to use Figma Draw because it's like it's supposed to be easy, and I think that it's been really beneficial for me because sometimes like the designers will have like a creative block where you're like, I don't know where to start. But with Figma Draw, I'm not even like, it sounds like an app, but it's like like an ad where I'm like, with Figma Draw you can't, but I'm like, I'm just doodling, and like it doesn't even matter if it's ugly or if I'm gonna use it. It's just like I like using it only because like I'm able to show my little cousins how to like design, and it's like it actually can go somewhere. Like I can take their like silly ideas of like a bunch of squares, and they're like, I want this to move in circles and whatever. And you go to like Figma Make and you like put the image in, and it'll like literally generate like code. And I would say that is crazy. I mean, with technology, with the rise of AI and a lot of, like mixed feelings about it, the one aspect that I'll have to, I guess, like admit that I'm excited for is that it is lowering the barrier of um like creation. Like for the first time I'm watching my cousins who have no coding experience, who like they're literally like 7 years old, and he's like creating apps for the first time. And he has all of these ideas, and going on Figma Draw, we'll like go through because his parents are having me like tutor him. And I'm like, okay, I'll tutor it, because he's like, yeah, I want it to be fun. I don't want it to be like, here's how you learn how to make an app so that you can work for Apple. It's like I want him to think about like, and he's a kid, so he's like, I want an app. It's a fire truck, and when people click on it, then it alerts the police department so we can put out a fire. And I was like, that's so sweet of you to like think of that. We have 911, but I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say like, okay, let's like make this out. Let's see like how it works. And he was like, if fighters can't be there, then like every person in the neighborhood can have a cup of water, and we can all put out a fire together. I'm like, okay, let's make it. Like, why not? And it's like the joy in seeing him draw out these like shapes, and we're putting it into Figma Make to see if like can something be created. And we actually got to a place where it's just like a prototype because it's like there's no back end code for it, but it's like he can see visually and even like click through it, and he's like, wow. And of course it's like if you look at it, it looks like a bunch of scribbles, but then we're able to like translate it so it kind of looks like a firefighter app for people with cups of water. And it's like really cool because it's instantly challenging him to think about the impossible and then making it real. And so like as crazy as his ideas are, for the first time you're able to like not only visualize it but start to move towards creating it. And I think like if I was 7, like we're just limited to a piece of paper and some crayons, and at most like a digital screen where I'm able to like draw and print it out. And I like even that is like that's the form of creation. It feels real to me, but I'm like I don't know there's like lasting impact, like my 7-year-old brain is like okay, well I have a cool piece of paper now, but like for my cousin, he's like that's it. I'm going to save the world by like creating an app for firefighters. And I'm like I want you to think that. And maybe you are. Like maybe in 10 years he's actually going to revolutionize like the like firefighting industry. But at least you're dreaming that far. You're not limiting yourself. And like now he's like on his free time, like not even being tutored. He's just like creating random apps. Like there's like a balloon popping app. I don't know what that's, but it's fun. And like there's there's no barrier to creation and the joy of making and the art of play. I can kind of see it, but in creating and making without bounds. And I think that's really promising and exciting for kids, especially like they don't have to learn like my 20 years of go like 25 years of college and learning cognitive science and having to have like multiple degrees and like 4 jobs to like learn how to make an app. It's like no, you can just do it and you're 7 and that's cool. Like that is the point of everything, which is like anyone can make something. And so that that's my long short answer.
I love that. I love how you talked about how it's kind of like bringing in like the joy and just kind of like the excitement and like fun to it. So that's really cool.
Thank you. I had so much fun on this podcast, and I'm so excited to hear more of your other episodes. But this was such a blast, and I loved the questions you sent.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for doing it. I really enjoyed this as well.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for having me on here. It was so much fun, and feel free to reach out anytime. And I don't know. I think you have my LinkedIn, but whenever this is out, I hope other folks listening know that they can reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn. I try to be active and spread the I guess I don't even say wisdom, but like just want to help other professionals make it in this hard world. So thank you for having me on here.